Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you very much for joining our lesson. This week we're going to read the life of Bediuzzaman. It's a short biography. From time to time we talk about Bediuzzaman as we read his work, which is called Risale-i-Nur. Knowing his life is also important because he showed the practice of his school of thought by his living. So it's very important that these truths that's in the book has to be practiced and proved by the life itself. So it's very important. People question, when they cannot see what they see in the books, if they cannot see it in the author's life, they become suspicious about his sincerity. But his whole life, which is almost 100 years, is completely full of sincerity and ikhlas. From time to time we give examples from prophets and Sahaba, but when we talk about them, we say that prophets are protected by Allah, so they cannot even have sins. Or the Sahaba, they were extraordinary people and they were living in Asr Sadeh. But like Bediuzzaman, he was living in the hardest of the times, where Islam was covered from every part, in every sense, with enemies. He lived a life of struggle, and his life had been in such a way that it can be a perfect example for all of us as today's Muslim who are having difficult times to apply what we know as truth and we believe, but we struggle to practice in our daily life. So I will be reading a short biography of Bediuzzaman, which is at the very beginning of a book published by Sözdar Publications. The rest is for you to discover because, as I said, it's a long life, almost 100 years of life, which is fruitful in every terms. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bediuzzaman Said Nursi was born in the Eastern Turkey in 1873 and died in 1960 at the age of 87 after a life of exemplary struggle and self-sacrifice in the cause of Islam. He was a scholar of the highest standing, having studied not only all the traditional religious sciences but also modern sciences, and had earned the name Bediuzzaman. Yeah, that was particularly interesting about Bediuzzaman. He wasn't just an example, he wasn't just a scholar of Islamic ilm, but also he was very much competent in modern sciences as well. He was named Bediuzzaman, wonder of his age, in his youth as a result of his outstanding ability and learning. Bediuzzaman's lifetime spanned the final decades of the Caliphate and Ottoman Empire, its collapse and dismemberment after the First World War, and after its formation in 1923, the first 37 years of the Republic. So very volatile times, things were changing rapidly throughout his life. And this Republic, of which the years up to 1950 are famous for the government's repressive, anti-Islamic and anti-religious policies. Yeah, like the types that we see in China right now against Uyghurs, something like that. A regime very similar to that has been applied in Turkey at the very first years of the Republic. Every sign, every sha'air about Islam, starting from azan, starting from dressing, starting from Quran and the letters and everything, they try to remove it from social life. So they try to make Islam invisible and try to make Turkey like a non-Muslim country. And Bediuzzaman continued his jihad and his struggle in those difficult times as well. Until the years following the First World War, Bediuzzaman's struggle in the cause of Islam had been active in the public domain. He had not only taught many students and had engaged in the debate and discussion with leading scholars from all over the Islamic world, but he had also commanded and led in person a volunteer regiment against the invading Russians in Eastern Turkey in 1914 for nearly 2 years until taken prisoner. So those times he was a young Muslim scholar. Istanbul was the Caliphate was in Istanbul, and Istanbul was like the center of all the Muslims, ulema. They were coming into Istanbul to have debates and to get some ideas and to have mashwara, to have istishara. So Bediuzzaman take full profit of those times, and after that the First World War has started. He fought personally and he was kept as prisoner. Furthermore, up to that time, he had sought to further the interests of Islam by actively engaging in public life. However, the years that saw the transition from empire to republic also saw the transition from the old Said to the new Said. So Bediuzzaman when he's talking about his life, he divides his life into three different eras, different periods. The first period is he's young, he's active in the social life, and he's looking for remedies and cures for Islamic problems in social life, in politics, and trying to talk to the Sultan and being active in the parliament, etc. That's the way he is trying to serve the cause of Islam. But in the second part of his life, which he calls a new Said, he just draws back from those life and focuses only on Quran and the remedies of Quran and getting the answers and sharing them with the people who need these things in his life. The new Said was characterized by his withdrawal from the public life and concentration on study, prayer, and thought for what was required now was a struggle of a different sort. The important thing is he never stopped his jihad, but he only changed the method he was using in the time. After a period of some 2 years in 1925, Bediuzzaman was sent into exile in Western Anatolia, and for the next 20 years, 25 years, and to a lesser extent for the last 10 years of his life, he suffered nothing but exile, imprisonment, harassment, and persecution by the authorities. So as we said, this was a very systemized harassment, this was a very systemized imprisonment and injustice against Bediuzzaman and his students of Risale-i-Nur. They have been targeted by the regime for 30 years, and later on to some extent it continued. But those 25 years, the regime directly tried to just maybe kill Bediuzzaman because he was imprisoned several times, or at least make him be forgotten, or at least not heard by his work. But these years of exile and isolation saw the writing of the Risale-i-Nur, the treatise of light, and its dissemination throughout Turkey. To quote Bediuzzaman himself, "Now I see clearly that most of my life has been directed in such a way, outside my own free will, ability, comprehension and foresight, that it might produce these treatises to serve the cause of the Quran. It is as if all my life as a scholar has been spent in preliminaries to these writings which demonstrate the miracleness of the Quran." Bediuzzaman understood an essential cause of the decline of Islamic world to be weakening of the very foundations of belief. Yeah, think about Islam as an apartment, as a building. He understood that the problem was not about the facade, it wasn't about the windows, nothing else. It was about the foundation that has to be strengthened, that needed strengthened. This weakening, together with the unprecedented attacks on those foundations in the 19th and the 20th centuries, carried out materialists, atheists, and others in the name of science and progress, led him to realize that the urgent and overriding need was to strengthen and even to save belief. What was needed was to expand all efforts to reconstruct the edifice of Islam from its foundations, belief, and to answer at that level those attacks with a jihad of the word. So it's not time for jihad of suyuf, it's not time for jihad of swords, but it's time of jihad of ideas, jihad of explanations, jihad of mind and intellect, jihad of soul and words. So that was Bediuzzaman doing all his life. Thus, in his exile, Bediuzzaman wrote a body of work, the Risale-i-Nur, that would explain and expound the basic tenets of his belief, the truths of the Quran to modern men. Each and every week, that's what we're trying to do. We're taking a very small part of Risale-i-Nur and trying to show that we have found the answers for ourselves, and we're trying to share these answers for you as well. His method was to analyze both belief and unbelief and to demonstrate through clearly reasoned arguments that not only is it possible by following the method of Quran to prove rationally all the truths of belief, such as God's existence and unity, prophethood, and the bodily resurrection, but also these truths are the only rational explanation of existence, man, and the universe. So we are not trying to convince you for something for which is not rational at all, but in fact, if we carefully observe all the possible all the possible ways that this creation has come to existence. He shows that the others all are non-possible, impossible, and he shows that the only possible way is the way shown by Quran. Bediuzzaman thus demonstrated in the form of easily understood stories, comparisons, explanations, and reason proofs that rather than the truth of religion being incompatible with the findings of modern science, the material's interpretation of those findings is irrational and absurd. Indeed, Bediuzzaman proved in the Risale-i-Nur that science's breathtaking discoveries of the universe's function corroborate and reinforce the truths of religion. So that in this way of approaching to these matters, he explained to everyone, not to only Muslims, but to non-believers and to everyone who is able to have reason in his mind, that Islam is proposing the only reasonable and the convincible and the true way for the human being, for the happiness in this world and the hereafter. To conclude, the Holy Quran addresses the intellect as well as man's other inner faculties. The Quran says, أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Don't you ever think about them? Don't you have a mind? Don't you have eyes to see? Don't you have ears to hear? Don't you walk around the earth to see what has happened to the people who has come before you? Yes. It directs man to consider the universe and its functioning in order to learn its true nature and purposes as the creation, and thus to learn the attributes of its single creator and his own duties as a creator. So we are trying to look at the universe with a manai harfi. What is that? We're looking at the universe to understand their meaning, what they are addressing to, what they are showing us, to understand our creation as well as our creator, his attributes, and his willing, his purpose in this creation. This then is the method that Bediuzzaman employed in the Risale-i-Nur. He explained the true nature of the universe as signs of its creator and demonstrated through clear arguments that when it is read as such, all the fundamentals of belief may be proved rationally. So the book of Quran has nothing to be, is in perfect compliance with the book of creation, because they are the author of the both books are the same. When this method is followed, a person attains a true belief that will be sound and firm enough to withstand any doubts that may rise in the face of the subtler text of materialism, naturalism, atheism, or the materialistic approach to scientific advances. For all scientific and technological advances are merely the uncovering of the workings of the cosmos created by Allah. When the cosmos is seen to be a vast and infinitely complex and meaningful unified book describing its single author. So universe means a single ayah, right? It's one ayah, one word, one sentence. So it's single author. Rather than causing doubt and bewilderment, all these discoveries and advances reinforce belief, they deepen and expand it. Man's most fundamental need is the need for religion, the need to recognize and worship Almighty God with all His most beautiful names and attributes, and to obey His laws, those manifest in the universe and those revealed through His prophets. For the ones who don't accept it as this is, we invite you to Risale-i-Nur. You will see that the only way to happiness is the way is as described by Quran and is shown by the Prophet ﷺ. In explaining the message of the Quran, Almighty God's final revealed book, brought and perfectly expounded by His final Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and Islam, the complete and perfected religion for mankind, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi demonstrated in the Risale-i-Nur that there is no contradiction or dichotomy between science and religion. Rather, true progress and happiness for mankind can and will only be achieved in this way, the way of the Quran. This was a brief biography of Bediuzzaman and his purpose and his struggle for the pleasance of Allah and for the cause of Islam. We invite everyone to take a look at Risale-i-Nur to see why these people, millions of people around the world from various backgrounds, have found the truth on Risale-i-Nur and has their saved lives in this life and in hereafter for both happiness and joy. Thank you very much for joining us. Inshallah, we'll be meeting you again for other lessons in the upcoming weeks. Remember us in your du'as. Wassalamu alaikum.